All right, we are ready to go. So whenever you are ready to go, let's get it.
All right. Hello, everybody. So glad to be presenting this morning. Well, this afternoon, technically. For me, it's afternoon. Talking today about how to be an entrepreneur in your workspace as an AT. And so very excited to do this talk. As most of you who know me, you'll not be surprised when I tell you that I'd love for you to interrupt me if you've got questions. Put your hand up. Chris will call on you and we'll talk, make this a conversational talk as we go through this.
Perfect. Well, let me give you a quick intro.
All right.
Yeah. So I wanted to let her get that out there and explain how we're going to let everything flow. So I love having a conversational tone with it all. But as you guys know, many of you know who Sheila is, but Sheila has been a leader in the concept of early intervention dating all the way back to the mid-90s when she developed what eventually became ATI Worksite Solutions. She's always been a strong advocate for the athletic training profession, so much so that in 2017, the NATA awarded Sheila honorary membership for her advocacy. Sheila currently helps continuing to grow the industrial athletic training programs nationwide through consulting with a variety of clients. In her presentation today, you will learn from this expert how to operate your clinic like a business. So please take it away.
Wonderful. And please note, I am not an athletic trainer. I am a physical therapist. I just love athletic trainers. No question about it. I am an AT at heart. What we're going to talk about today. What is it that you can do as an industrial athletic trainer? Who are your stakeholders at your industrial sites? How do you integrate with your client? And most importantly, how can you get your opportunities, which are endless at your site, to come into fruition? And again, anybody that has any questions or comments, please put your hand up and let's have a discussion about it. That'll make this presentation go a whole lot better. So, what's in your bag of tricks? As most of you know who are in the industrial setting, things changed when you went into the industrial setting with what you could do and what you could not do. But I have always been a strong advocate that the absolute right provider for the industrial setting is the athletic trainer. I think your skill set is absolutely spot on for what's needed in a successful industrial program. And those things include the ability to work on your own, the ability to manage multiple stakeholders, which you're used to from your athletic days, be that the coach, the athlete, and the parent. You're also very comfortable making quick triage decisions. And so for those reasons and many more, I do believe the athletic trainer is the absolute right person to have in the industrial setting for early injury intervention and triage of injuries. One of the things that I think we have to keep in mind, and I know in my previous days, something I preached over and over and over again, is the importance of medical treatment beyond first aid. And in the industrial setting, you know, the goal of early intervention and early intervention and prevention is to do just that, is to keep injuries from escalating up to a recordable case or even just a work comp case. And by doing that, we have to stay within the guidelines of OSHA and understand what medical treatment beyond first aid really is. Oftentimes people would ask, Sheila, what keeps you up at night? You know, what's the scariest thing that you have to deal with in your job? And it was always the same thing. It was that an athletic trainer, through sheer passion and desire for helping their patient, their employee, they would go beyond what was allowed by first aid. And so that represents a huge risk for multiple folks. It includes a huge risk for you, the athletic trainer. It includes a huge risk for the client and the client relationship, and the client and OSHA should an audit happen where they came in and started auditing the books. But does anybody have any questions about what medical treatment beyond first aid is? Because this is a really important concept. All right. We'll keep going then. So who are your stakeholders? most important thing to remember when you're working on site in an industrial setting is that you are a guest. You are there at the beholdens of the employer. There is a contract in place typically that explains the specifics of the relationship. But at the end of the day, what we always knew was that any client at any given time could say, you know what, we don't want so-and-so on site anymore. That was a risk for the program, and it was a risk for the individual person that was being asked to leave the site. So it is absolutely critical that as an on-site athletic trainer in the industrial setting, to remember who the multiple stakeholders are and how important it is for you to have a good, positive relationship with them. So the stakeholders include human resources, operations, the safety department, and the corporate employer. Human resources typically is not as involved with the industrial setting as much as safety is. And some of you may think that you're really reporting just directly to the safety person, but I would caution you to keep in mind that there is always people on the outside of safety that are always looking in to say, what is it that we are getting from this program? And is it worth what we're paying from this program? The other stakeholders are the employees, the associates, or the team members that you are dealing with, whatever they call themselves, but they are certainly stakeholders in the importance of the program, and critical for you to be involved with those associates, team members, and employees, and make sure that you're delivering 100% on the services that you're working on. Then we get into some other stakeholders that you may not be as familiar with. Your employer may be held by an equity partner. That's very common. And so there'll be sister companies that are going to be held by that same equity partner. I would strongly encourage you to find out if that's the case at your site, because those equity partners always have someone in charge of best practices for all the companies that they hold. And one of those best practices may be you. And so the opportunity to share among the other companies that are held by the equity partner is immense, and it really does work. But you've got to do some digging to find out who are those equity partners. Was that a question that I heard come up, Chris?
Yes, Lex, you raised your hand.
Yeah, Sheila, thank you for bringing that up. How would you recommend going about finding out who an equity partner is for a client that you work with?
Yeah, ask the question. Your safety partners should know if they are held by an equity partner. Your human resources should know. But you can usually find it on the website of the employer, down at the very bottom of the website. It will list out who the equity owner is, who the holder of the business is. And they definitely will know if they are held by an equity partner, the leaders within the organization.
Great, thank you.
Good to hear your voice, Lexi.
Yours as well.
Lastly, on the stakeholders is your employer. I will tell you, getting client contracts is a very, very difficult thing to do. Your sales team is working countless hours trying to find the right partner to get the right contract to get an on-site program. And the employer is beholden on you, the person who's delivering the services, to make sure you're delivering at 100%. Those contracts can be gone as fast as you snap your finger if the wrong things are done. So one of your stakeholders is most certainly the person who employs you. And that should always stay at top of mind. One of my favorite topics, reporting. So the reports that you turn out are the one thing that is probably the most important that you do while you're on site at your industrial setting. Now, that may surprise a lot of you that I say that, but it is the one thing that stands when you are not around to tell your story about what you're doing with the time that you are on site. What I know to be true is that many of our athletic trainers would often wait till the 11th hour to get their report done. And it was something that you could just see people's eyes rolling when it was time to do the reports. It was the last of the list. Your preference would be to be out on the floor working with the employees or the team members. You'd rather have engagement time with your employees. You don't want to be sitting down at a computer writing out a report. And oftentimes reports were simply pull up last month's report, update the numbers, and call it a day. This is a problem because that report is going up a chain. There is no question that report has to tell a story. And it's not just numbers, guys. It's about important one-on-one engagement, conversations, near misses. You've got to know what your employer feels are the key metrics. Are they recordables? Are they near misses? Are they turnover? What is the hot button that they're working on in that calendar year? And for the next 2 to 3 years, what are the metrics that they're looking to push? And you need to address those metrics in your report. Remember that your cost of you being on site is going to be anywhere, depending on the client, anywhere from the low of $8,000 to a high of $11,000 per person per month on site. That's a lot of cash. And when an employer is looking at their bottom line and the bottom line's getting tight, you have to realize that you may be one of those line items that could go away at any given time. Because the reality is they don't have to have you on site. They've got work comp coverage. They have to have work comp coverage. They've got the ability to send out anybody with any kind of injury to an occupational clinic to be treated. Everybody on this call knows that's not the right way to do things, but at the end of the day, it's a reality. And the tough reality is that you are not essential to be on site. Now, I say that, but you all know that I know you're essential to be on site. But if your report doesn't stand for that, then the value may not be clear to the people who are making the ultimate decisions about how they're spending their money. I always like to make sure that reports stand alone so that and I did this a lot in my previous position, I read a lot of reports. I just pull them up randomly, go into the server, pull up random reports and just read them and put my hat on as a accountant for that employer and say, does this make sense to me? Does this leave open-ended questions? Does it make sense what they're doing on site? What does this number mean? What does it mean if there's a lag time for reporting? What if one of the items on your report says, average lag time from incident to reporting is 6 days? Is that a problem? Is that good? Is that bad? What are you doing to try to eliminate that lag time? Are your injuries occurring with all your new hires? Is that good or is that bad? Is it common or is there something that should be done about that? Is there an opportunity for improvement to make sure that you're getting to the new hires faster and quicker and make sure that you as the on-site provider even know who the new hires are? I love it when an employer mandates that the new hires have to wear a certain color vest or a certain hat or at least a tag that says that they're within the first 60 to 90 days with the employer, because those are the people you need to be spending time with. And you need to highlight that you're spending time with those new hires as well. Questions?
We have a hand up from Emily.
Emily. Yeah, Emily, what you got?
Hi, Sheila. Thanks for bringing up this topic. I love it. Do you have any thoughts or insight on, how much time should we be spending reporting versus working with the employees?
Good question. I don't know that I've got a number that I can give you, but I can tell you it's more than you're spending. We have great reporters in our organization in the past. I've seen some really good reports. The worst thing that you can do is have a template that you just drop in new numbers, and you don't have enough free text opportunities. One of the things that I think is I would encourage you all to do is you typically have peers that work at other locations that you may be friends with just personally. Share your report with them. Let somebody else who doesn't know your business, doesn't know your facility, read your report with fresh eyes and see what kind of questions come up. What doesn't make sense to them? What numbers just need more explanation? When a recordable number goes up 1 month over another month, is it ergo related, or are they trip, slips, and falls? Put the story behind it, because when someone sees that the recordables just went up this month, somebody's going to be raising some concerns, because those are typically the hot buttons that they want to keep down. So make sure you explain why those recordables go up, if in fact there is a story behind that.
We have Katie has a question as well.
Hi, thank you so much for talking about this. I piloted a lot of programs, and something that doesn't really come up, and that's a lot of newer athletic trainers into the industrial setting find, is like they're kind of trigger shy to report barriers when they're trying to do projects, and whether the barrier being like a vendor or just like getting data for, support from a certain group, including that in a report in a very like high level, non-confrontation way. But how do you feel about including those in those reports?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. There are employers out there that are going to hold certain pieces of data very tight to their chest. But if one of the reasons that they've decided to have you on site is to impact that key metric, then you've got to be able to have access to that key metric. You can't bring a group on site and say, look, we really want you to reduce our injury rate. We want to reduce our near misses. We want to have an impact on our work comp numbers, both in frequency and intensity. But then they say, I'm not going to let you know what those numbers are. I'm not going to let you know if you're successful or not. That just simply doesn't make sense.
Right.
And it has to be go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. I was actually in that position where I wasn't allowed access, because I was a contractor, to the OSHA 300 logs for that facility, which is always a fun magic trick to kind of figure out. But finding my way to still show my worth without having those, those like hard data numbers.
Yeah.
And in the monthly report that goes to everyone, that ended up being the reason why the contract didn't continue. But being able to show like my value as an athletic trainer, being there to the stakeholders and everyone else, but also saying like, hey, you guys aren't like giving me access to some pretty important data.
Well, I think that's where you have to have that frank conversation with your key stakeholder. And simply, quite frankly, the recordable data should be public knowledge. They should be posting that somewhere. And they've got to report that to OSHA, and that should be public knowledge. So the fact that they're holding it that tightly to the chest really would concern me. But I think, that's where you sit down, maybe you bring in your supervisor to help support you, but you have that conversation and simply say, look, I'm here to help you impact those key metrics. If I don't know what those key metrics are, how do I know if I'm doing my job or not? And, unfortunately, the reality is that sometimes that employer may say, I'll let you know if you're not doing your job. I've heard it before, and that's a very, as an employer, I will tell you, those are the contracts that concern me the most, because I knew that at any day someone's going to cut that contract. That's not a collaborative relationship. That is what you want to find in an on-site program. Your on-site program, and we'll go to the next slide because that's a great segue, is that you've got to integrate with your client. I always encouraged our athletic trainers to remember that they're a guest in their client's house, but they're a really close-knit guest. They need to be so integrated with the client that the employees trust them and really are willing to open up about discomfort and pain. We all know there's barriers to the industrial setting where, it's the hotshot guys that don't want to admit that they're having any problems, to a language barrier, to the supervisor who frowns upon anybody reporting discomfort or pain. But the more you can integrate with your client, the more you're going to have those open conversations about what's the impact of the program and where else can you help them. We always like to talk a lot with our athletic trainers about remembering that you're not an employee of the client. And it's important to keep that in mind. I remember one day I had an employee report that they had already asked their client if they could take some PTO. And I just kind of laughed, because it's like, well, it's not up to your client if you can take PTO. It's up to your employer if you can take PTO. So let's have that discussion about where that line is drawn in the sand. You're an employee of your site program, not of the client. And in that matter, I strongly recommend that you somehow be able to be distinguished as separate, whether that's you're wearing a particular logo wear, your vest is a certain color. Make sure that the clients know that you are an outside vendor. I'm going to pause there because that tends to be a hot button with some folks. Does anybody have any questions about that or struggles with remaining separate from your employer site?
I haven't run into it with my own employment, but I've run into it with some employees in the past where bordering on co-employment issues. And we've had a couple times where we've had to bring it up to the client and say, hey, listen, we're going to run into legal issues if you don't let us manage our employees.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That co-employment issue is very real. And the client trying to manage the athletic trainer, is a real problem. They've got to go through the supervisor. There has to be somebody in management that has a relationship with that client stakeholder as well, not just the on-site athletic trainer. So whether that's an account manager, an industry manager, whatever terminology you call it, that person needs to be that conduit for the on-site athletic trainer to oftentimes just to be their advocate if there's challenges going on.
And Amos posted a question, said, do you have suggestions for how to diplomatically navigate that conversation with the client side management?
Yeah, I love the legal, it's a legal issue if there's co-employment going on. But I think that's where, I hope as the on-site athletic trainer, you've got strong leadership behind you that can come in alongside you and have those discussions. They need to understand that they are not your supervisor. They are your client, and you can have a very close relationship with that client, but they can't be the person who is trying to manage your day-to-day activities from a performance metric standpoint. I say that and I'm rolling my own eyes there because that's not necessarily true. I hope that you all laughed at that. Anyway, the client is the one who's going to be guiding you through the day-to-day metrics, the day-to-day encounters, making sure that you are meeting their expectations. But how that is done and maybe the performance of those activities really falls back to your on-site supervisor, who I would hope has a very good, close relationship with your client. Anybody, can anybody speak to that? Do you feel like you've got some really strong support from your organization? Do they come beside you and help you out with those discussions?
I see Jan has a hand up, and then Lex and have others. Nice. Did you guys have questions, or you're just saying yes, me too?
Saying yes.
Awesome.
A little bit of both. I'm currently going through that with my current site. The global head of safety is pretty much asking me to attend 8 a.m. meetings when I start at 12 or 2 every day. So that's something that my team has actually been really good at backing me on, and trying to work through that whole situation with the head of safety. So it's definitely having a great support system is huge for that.
Yeah, that's a great example of, asking you to work different hours. And we all know that sometimes that's what you have to do. Sometimes you have to swing your hours, but it can't be done on a regular basis. You don't want to be, let me think of another way to say this. When we sold our program, we were selling just that. We were selling a program that included supervision, that included performance metrics, that included training, reporting, all of those things. What we were selling was not a staffing program. And that's the key difference, is when an employer thinks of their on-site provider as simply providing the staff and they're going to manage the staff, unless that's clearly delineated in the program outline, and that's what your employer agrees to, that's a real problem. Because, most on-site programs, as I know them, are exactly that. They're on-site programs. It's not just a staffing agency providing an athletic trainer for the employer to manage. Did I get any amens for that?
Several. Katie,
All
did you have another question?
Yeah. This is, oh my gosh, this is so 100%. Yes. I have found that, like, I've learned over the years that, growing up in like the traditional setting and then coming to the industrial, there's a lot of like, it's not me, it's them. Right. So, with having that perspective of like, okay, something bigger is going on because I'm a contractor or third party or whatever, having the conversation of maybe not jumping straight to like, no, I'm not doing that, but it's like, okay, what is the solution? Where can we find that middle ground of, could this meeting be an email situation where I'm still getting all the information, but I'm still able to maintain my hours? And that it's hard to do that because, like, a lot of times we're right and they're wrong. So, but, like, I think that's something I've learned the hard way for sure, with just coming in with a hard no instead of how can we meet in the middle? How can we work together to find a solution?
Yeah, I think that goes back to that collaboration word, and finding a way to work together. I tell you, one of the best things that could happen is you get invited to a meeting, because that means you are integrating with the client and they find value in what you're providing for them. So make sure if you do get invited into meetings, safety meetings, it may be HR related meetings, make sure you're prepared. And I always told our ATs, find out why they want you to attend the meeting. Is it just for knowledge base, or are they expecting you to provide some insight or some data, so that you can make sure you're fully prepared for that meeting? All right. Be a student of your site. One of my favorite slides. You know, when we would deploy a new athletic trainer, one of the things that we like to tell them is that for the first week, the most important thing you can do is listen. Listen to what the employees are saying. Find out, are they employees, team members, or associates? Because when you call them the wrong thing, that means you don't understand your site. Understand what they call different tools, understand what they call different processes, and understand why they do things the certain way that they do. One of the ways to open up communication with folks that you encounter out on the floor is to simply ask them that question. Tell me what you're doing and why you're doing it the way you do it. What's the purpose? Because people love to talk about themselves. They love to share, and it shows that you really are interested in what they're doing. You know, become that student of your site, become the knowledge holder for the processes that they complete, and make sure you use the same terminology, not only in your conversations, but in your reporting. All right, let's wrap this up and go into some growth strategies and looking for opportunities. You know, when we would grow, when we would talk about growth within our organization, that growth within an organization, typically for most providers of industrial athletic training, potentially is going to be anywhere from 50 to 70% of growth is coming from same store business, meaning it's coming from inside clients that they already have. That's a big number. But it shouldn't surprise anybody, because if you are an on-site athletic trainer, you already know that they love you. So the opportunities for growth should be pretty extensive. Growth within your same store, we call it same store business, is the biggest and the easiest to occur. And that can be adding programs to your current services that are being offered. You know, we always talk about, when you're an on-site athletic trainer, you've got a dozen things you've got to get done in any one given day. And so if you were to go in and have a conversation with your stakeholders about, let's say, injuries are happening in the first 30 days, most injuries are happening, or reports of injuries are happening within the first 30 days. Is there something we can do about maybe vetting our new hires a little bit better, so that we make sure we're getting people that are physically capable of doing the job? Great way of selling post-offer employment testing. But if you had to add that to your list of things, you've already got 12 things you have to do. Now there's 13 you have to do testing of new employees. That's going to be a problem. That's when you upsell to another provider on site and say, there's value in doing post-offer testing, but it's going to take somebody else to do that. And so maybe you've just upsold your program to now you have a peer on site with you. Look around you and see, are there other providers on site that come from other vendors? Many of the many of the industrial on-site athletic trainer programs are also venturing into business with nurses and nurse practitioners. So it may be that your employer would want to know if there's an on-site nurse there that they could bid on for the business. Maybe it's an on-site nurse that is an employee of the employer, and they're getting ready to retire. That's a huge opportunity for your employer to say, hey, can we bid on that business? Is that something that we could integrate and make this an integrated program? Also finding out what are the key metrics of your employers, of your site. What are they looking to achieve, and how are they looking to achieve that? If it's let's say they potentially want a improved return to work program, so that they can bring people back into work sooner than what they're currently doing, where maybe folks are off work, lost time is too high of a number. Maybe you can encourage them to write functional job descriptions, or whatever the terminology is your provider uses, but go in there and identify what are the critical and essential functions of the job that individuals need to be able to come back and perform. So there's another service that maybe you could sell to them. Wearables are hot right now. And probably many of you are shaking your head out there saying, yes, my employer is wanting us to integrate wearable technology. There's a lot of different wearable technologies out there. But I tell you, employers love to see data. It's one thing for you to say, I'm seeing a lot of bending and twisting on job line 72. I really think we need to do some intense education with the employees out here. That's one thing, but when you can put wearable technology on somebody and the technology shows the data spikes where there is increased risk, employers feel like, oh, wow, now I really get it. Now that makes sense to me. So bringing wearable technology to your workforce is another opportunity for increasing your value and your growth into your own location. Anybody out there have a story about wearable technology and how they're using it?
We have a couple of sites using some devices that have haptic feedback. So as they spend too much time outside of proper posture, it will give them a little buzz to remind them to get back into position. Seen some good results with that on the short term,
Yep.
but not necessarily in the long term once they stop the use of it. So people tend to go back to their bad habits. So
Yeah.
we're trying to work on some other behavioral changes to make those things stick longer in some of those sites.
Yeah, the two things typically happen. They either they stop wearing the device, or they get so used to being buzzed that they ignore it. So you've got some behavioral issues. You certainly have to get over those barriers.
Yep. And I saw Luis, you had a hand up.
Yeah, exactly. No, thank you, Sheila, for the information. I just want to say that the way we use in the insurance realm, the wearables is more of a data-driven to have the data and say, hey, over the course of 2-3 months, we've noticed that most of your employees on line 72 bend 100 times a day. And then we can use that as a tracking mechanism to implement some solutions, some recommendations to eliminate those hazards. And that's where the biggest selling. And then after, you can use that post-op or post-implementation and say, hey, Q1, no recommendation, 100 bends per day. Q3, 4, now we drop to only 20 or
Yep.
15. And then that gives the client a little bit more like, oh, it gives them a little bit more open buy-in to implement some other locations around the facility or location to implement some other recommendations or more data-driven solutions.
Yeah, I like the way you address those opportunities, and that kind of goes into the next bullet point, and that's additional sites. Oftentimes, employers will implement early intervention and prevention programs at their larger locations, but then they have shadow locations out there that may only have 50 to 80 to 100 employees, and they can't afford to have a full-time provider on site. That's where you can use your wearable technology as well, so that you could even say, look, let me go into that location one time a month and highlight the people that are having the biggest problems. That wearable technology may help you find those people faster than just walking through the facility. You would potentially, if they've worn the technology ahead of time, you may potentially know ahead of time who the high abusers of body mechanics and ergonomics might be, and that's who you want to spend your time focusing on. Additional sites are prime for opportunities for growth. I promise you that plant operations managers talk to one another, and when they are reporting out in their general meetings that their injury rates are falling, 25 to 40%. I can tell you there are other plant managers that are going, how'd you do that? How in the world are you getting your injury rates to go down? What is your secret sauce? What is it that you've done that has made the difference for you? So becoming close with your site stakeholders and having those conversations, don't be shy. Ask the question of your plant manager, how do you share this information across your corporate platform? Is this something that is being talked about? And is this an opportunity for us to grow onto those other locations, or at least have a conversation with some of those other plant managers about bringing in an early intervention injury prevention program? Other divisions could be also an opportunity. They may be connected, but they may be completely separate. I've seen it happen both ways, where let's call it the engine division is completely separate from the small parts and components division, and they don't share information across those platforms. You've got to find that out and ask that question to see if there are opportunities for sharing. But it all comes down to data. It has to be data driven, that you're having an impact with the on-site program. That's something that goes back to that one slide that I said is my biggest pet peeve, and that is reporting. It goes back to your reporting and whether or not you're proving the value of your on-site program. If you don't have that support behind you, there's going to be a question. It's going to be much harder to sell, whether or not it's to another division or even an equity partner holding company. Data is the key. I'm going to pause there for questions.
Hey, Sheila, outside of the typical TRIR, DART, lost work days, what other data do you think probably shows the most for in your experience?
Yeah, I think an on-site program really drives down lag time. And we all know that lag time is the biggest culprit for injuries escalating in an intensity. So the sooner we can get people to report minor discomfort and pain versus waiting until it becomes a major issue is going to be critical in better resolution rate. Near misses are important to employers. How many times are they avoiding further escalation of injuries? Lost time is critical. Temporary restrictions are critical. Your DART rate is critical. Turnover rate is also something that many employers are struggling with today. And, you know, you got to ask, why is it that a company is dealing with maybe it's a 40% turnover rate within the first 60 days. Something obviously is not getting communicated to those applicants at the beginning of their employment that keeps them on site. It could be that the work is just too hard for them, that they're not physically capable of managing the work. And maybe that's something you can have an impact on. Maybe it's a new hire training program, or telling that employee that, yeah, you know, your first 30 days, 60 days, you're going to be sore than you've probably ever been in your life, but it'll get better. You just got to hang in there. Sometimes it's just simply that reassurance that might keep the turnover rate from escalating so high. But those are all key metric points that should, if you are an entrepreneur at your site, raise opportunities for growth and for new programming within your site. I'm a huge advocate of the on-site athletic trainer, and have been blessed to work with so many really, really, really strong athletic trainers through the years. And I tell you, there's no better salesperson than a passionate, driven on-site athletic trainer who's deeply embedded with their client, who understands the key metrics and has the relationships with the key stakeholders for opportunities for growth. And it is because of those successes that, you know, we were able to see the growth that we saw over the course of years from the early 2011s onward to see the growth within the same store business. That is, Chris, all I have today. I am wide open for questions or comments or anything you want to, team, you guys want to talk about a little bit more.
Here, go ahead, Lex.
Sheila, I was dying to ask you this question when I found out you would be speaking. I want to ask how you would recommend me as a leader to empower other athletic trainers I see with leadership potential in an organization.
Wow, that's a deep question, Lexi.
I knew I'd
Yeah.
ask the right person though.
Well, you know, any organization worth its salt should have a leadership program that is there to foster young leaders among their organization. And I say the word young leaders, but you know, a strong leader can be somebody who was just hired in by an organization. They just simply have the skill sets to do leadership, and that's interpersonal skills, that's awareness of data and management opportunities. So I would encourage you to tell your peers to get involved with those opportunities and put their name out there if you want to be considered for growth within your organization. If you don't put your name out there, it isn't going to happen on its own. You know, opportunities don't knock at your door. You've got to open the door and look for them. Don't know if that helps, Lexi, or not.
Yes, that nailed it. Thank you.
Hey, we have another question that I missed a few minutes ago from Beth Hubbard. She said, any suggestions for dealing with outdated software systems in regard to data collection for client site metrics?
Yeah, Beth, I'm assuming that's your own software system, the system that you use. I'll assume.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Yeah, that you got to go back to your management and tell them where you're having your barriers. You know, what's keeping you from being able to turn out the best report that you possibly can turn out. And if it's your software program's not collecting the right data points, you got to find out a way around that. And maybe that's manually keeping those key data points if your system does not capture them. IT represents one of the biggest challenges because there's not really there's not an off-the-shelf software program out there that is good, in my opinion, for on-site industrial athletic trainers. So your employer, the person who you work for, is having to develop that system. You got some noise in the background there.
There we go.
Okay. So it's not uncommon for the employer to struggle with having the right data collection program, but you may just manually have to collect that data yourself. And trust me, many times I thought this shouldn't be this hard for us to update this software program to be able to get the application that we needed. And I was quite often told I was wrong, that it was much harder than I ever imagined. So I am not a software guru.
And I just took over your screen for a moment. I put this up here for you to get your CEU. Please take your phone, scan this little QR code, and go do this. Do the survey, the post-course survey, and we'll make sure we get everything sent out to you. But this helps us make sure that we are, one, staying in compliance with everything the BOC has us do for CEUs. And then also it helps us continue to improve things as years go by each one. I see, Luis, you have a hand up again?
Yes, Sheila, I have a question for you. Can you, if you don't mind, giving us a little bit more information or expand a little bit more on how we can really provide value not just to ourselves, but to our clients. So when I was working at Amazon as an IPS, one of the things that I did was obviously just keep track of the documented injuries. But depending on the body part, obviously that has a specific numeric cost. So if I did 5 in a week, 5 back assessments, all first aid, we can kind of guess that they would be about $15,000 to $30,000 per each. But can you give a little bit more insight on how much we can really value our services, what else we can document on our end to really give the employer or the client, like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what's benefiting you, and this is how we've been helping out?
Yeah, Louise, I think it goes back to your particular client site, because every client has different key metrics, and those metrics, unfortunately, sometimes change year over year. So one year they may be focused on recordables, and the next year they're focusing on TRIR, which makes it very difficult for the on-site provider to be chasing different key metrics. But you've got to know from your client what are the key elements that they want to be able to track. And I think your idea of putting a financial value on a near miss or a first aid only is fantastic. But at the end of the day, it is always a challenge to prove the value of the injury that never happened. You know, you can say it's a back injury. Okay, it could have been a disc injury. It could have been $25,000, or it could have been a minor sprain strain, right? And so I find when we, in my past life, put a financial value on the injury that never occurred, it was always an eye roll from the employer stakeholders, that they're like, yeah, right, there's no way that's the case. And so be careful with that one. I think it's a valiant effort. Tracy just said yes, she saw the eye rolls with her employer as well when they tell them how much money we saved. You know, you are trying to put a value on it, but it's often sometimes thought of as, gee, is it really, did we really save $20,000 with that near miss?
Awesome. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you for your input. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, Louise.
Deb posted a question in here as well. She said, how do you walk the fine line between early reporting and planting seeds? I've seen where the safety professionals are pushing early reporting, and then people find things to report just with the plan of potentially turning it into an injury.
Yeah, you know what? If you encourage people to report and you get them to talk to you about something that's going on, then you've had a success. So my comment back to client stakeholders is, if you are worried about us coming in and trying to find people with minor discomfort and injuries, then you're worried about the wrong thing, because that's exactly what we want to have to be successful in our programs. The more people we can talk to, the better off you're going to be at the end of the day. So encourage that reporting and call that a success. When you go from first month where only 20 people talked with you about discomfort and pain, and month 2 was 40, that's a win, man. That's a massive win. Not something they should be afraid of.
All right. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your time. Thanks for coming in here. Sheila, we really appreciate your insight, all of your experience and all of this. Truly are an innovator in the world of industrial athletic training, and I know you've made a big difference for a lot of us. So thank you so much for your time. Y'all don't forget to fill out this survey.
Great to see
you,
so many
Sheila.
familiar names on the screen there. It's been my pleasure to present, and I wish you all the best of a day that you can have. Great to see your face there, Carrie.
I'm going to.
Thank you.
All right, Chris.